Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger, and I have with me here today the co-founder and COO of ScreenCloud. And if you're pulling it up on your computer, it's screencloud.io. This is David Hart. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about you and the company.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. So I'm David Hart. I'm one of the founders of ScreenCloud, and ScreenCloud is a software as a service business. We help companies, big and small, manage and create content on public screens using consumer devices. That was one of our kind of USPs when we first started. So things like Amazon Fire TV, V-Stick, or a Chromecast or something like that connects your TV, a normal screen, and makes it a kind of digital smart screen.
That's really cool. So I went on your website. I was watching your video on there, and what I found really interesting was it looked like, if you had screens all over the world, you could manage them from one, like your laptop, basically. I mean, is that correct? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when we first started, we were talking to one company, and they said that in order to update content on their screens in stores, they were having to courier DVDs out to the store managers and things like that. So, that was a long time ago, I guess. But so effectively, we're like an operating system that works across different media players. So if your screen is smart and can connect to the internet, you can effectively run ScreenCloud, and you can manage all the content, schedule it. You can sort of say, well, this store has, or this office has this content, and this office has that content. You can give people different permissions, who can publish content, who can edit content, that kind of stuff. So like a content management system. But
yeah, what kind of clients are your biggest ones? I mean, I imagine I see in my head like Reebok shoe stores and stuff, or retail where they have things running on the screen. Are those kind of the biggest clients you have? I mean, or is there other industries that I'm not even thinking about that have a use for this sort of technology?
Yeah, I mean, so retail is important, but actually it's not critically our most important sector, and I think that might be because they're already pretty well catered for. So really, digital signage came out of the audio-visual world, and I think they got into retail quite early. And when we came along relatively recently, we were like, hey, you don't need these expensive proprietary bits of hardware. You can just use consumer hardware. So what we found is, we have got quite a lot of retail customers, but we've also got a lot of offices and critically kind of sort of deskless workers. So if you're working in manufacturing or health, education, it could be, and manufacturing could be sort of literally in a warehouse, or it could be like chemical engineering, that sort of thing. So people that don't necessarily sit in front of a desk all day, but still need to get that critical information across to them. That's another big sector.
So what about like subway stations or government facilities or something like that, where there's a lot of information running constantly, like maybe like train schedules? I mean, do you see things like people using it for more infrastructure practical purposes, or do you see it more like marketing agencies running ads and being able to control those?
Strangely, it's not that many ads. So there is a few that do that, but it's not so much used for that. It's kind of more used for we've got about 9,000 customers, and there's a real variety of things. So on the retail side, it's like digital menu boards. If you go into like a fast food restaurant, and they've got their kind of menus up behind, so that's all generated digitally. And the key thing is that it's updated dynamically. So that those prices it's not someone creating a JPEG and uploading it. Those prices are fed in through their EPOS system. I think that's probably where we're slightly different to the traditional players. And the traditional players go, right, here's your hardware, and just make JPEGs and stick them up there and they'll look pretty. What we've said is actually for lots of people, they don't have someone sat there making videos and JPEGs, but what they do have is content that can be driven dynamically from their databases. So it could be pricing information, but it could be sales data, anything really that people need to kind of better do their job. So call centers might use them, for example, to show the volume of calls. We've got like a big internet company that's constantly monitoring their traffic and the server loads, and they'd have those on the screens as well. So there's a real mixture really of use cases, which is why we've got 80 plus different app integrations. So anything from your social media through to specific dashboards like Tableau or the types of things that people are using day to day in their offices.
So, you told me one kind of big pain point that your software solves, which is, the old school way was literally having to courier like DVDs or something. Yeah. Is there anything else, I guess just say there is, but what else does this software really solve that wasn't there before, other than, having that kind of manual upload situation?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are lots of different types of use cases. So I guess the key thing to think about with digital signage is that it's a kind of passive communication module. It's not like you actively go on. So let's say you're reading an email or you want to look at some sales data. You have to go on and log into something, look at your intranet, or look at a dashboard. With screens, it's much more of a kind of passive experience. So what we're finding is people are using it to kind of connect either their customers or each other with kind of information that's going on in the company. It sounds a little bit obscure, but I mean, I'll give you an example of a way which is kind of, I suppose, shows how companies can use screens to connect better with their end customers. So this is quite a simple example, but so one of our customers manufactures houses. So they, on a conveyor belt. So they've got these teams of people and they're working at each pull station and they're, connecting houses together. And what they had before was screens just telling them that they've got, 30 minutes left on their station and then it's going to move on to the next thing. But what they realized was that they wanted to kind of make people a little bit more connected with the customer, so it's rather than this abstract experience of I'm just putting this screw on and using a wrench and doing it up. They were saying, well, we know who the customer is for each of these houses. And we probably know where they live, and we probably know a little bit about them because selling a house is quite a sales intensive process. So they said, well, what if we use sort of some quotes that we get from the sales team and the name and the sort of location of the customer, and we can actually bring it to life. So rather than just kind of working on a pull station, you're seeing that you're making this house for Mr. and Mrs. Brown, and they live in Illinois, and they've said that this is something they've been saving up for 10 years, and this is their retirement home, and they're going to live the rest of their day. Suddenly that connection with the end user is a lot more real. And it's quite a small example, but it's a way in which you use screens to kind of bring things to life using the data that companies already have. I think that's kind of where this is going. So typically or historically, digital signage is really seen as just somewhere to put digital posters, really. And now we're seeing it much more as being kind of it's real content that's updated in real time, dynamically, and it's kind of bringing to life and connecting things in a way that we couldn't really do prior to this. It's not the same as having a mobile app or an email saying, hey, let's have a look at your mobile app and see who you're making this home for. These people are working on factory lines. They're not going to be firing up their mobile apps. And it's that kind of thing, I think, is where it's going.
You told me earlier in the pre-show that you started off as a consultancy.
Yeah.
So how did you go from consultants to a SaaS? I mean, like that's a pretty big leap. What was that turning point? What motivated you guys to make that shift and start ScreenCloud?
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing that a lot of people have asked us about, and effectively, we were an agency and we were doing side projects, and we did a number of side projects. Some of them kind of did okay. We sold a couple to various, for a private equity company, and then we did a JV with someone else, and that got merged and bought and everything. So we kind of done okay, but we realized that they were all kind of like side projects. They would do, they kind of at their peak maybe. Well, apart from the one we did a JV on, which got quite large, but the kind of side projects that we were doing, which were kind of SaaS projects, and we did quite a lot of mobile apps and things like that. The most they ever got to was, say, maybe $30,000 a month in revenue. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of like, so at the time we were going, well, if we just, there's only 3 of us, right? Who are the founders, and we had staff, but we thought, well, if we just keep doing that and just keep doing $30,000 a month things, it won't take long before we can get rid of clients altogether. Because, anyone who works in a consultancy, clients are they're hard work, right?
Yeah.
And you don't get that thing.
Fire right now. I owe my agency for 10 years.
Yeah, and it's draining. And I remember coming back from Christmas, and I've been off. I came back and I realized that that one of our apps had made more money in over Christmas. I think it was the year that iPads came out, and everybody got an iPad for Christmas, and we had this amazing Christmas period. And I think, our various apps generated more revenue than I paid myself for the whole year. I was like, this is crazy. We weren't even at work and we were making this money. So we definitely got the bug. Like we love the idea of having products, because the products that you produce, unlike when you're working for clients, and they always change what you do and kind of go, oh, don't do it this, that, and you're like, oh, and you just get paid for what you do. But with products, you get paid for the upside completely, and it's all down to your effort. So we made the decision, the 3 of us, to do this. But I think the critical thing was, we also made the really tough decision that if we were properly going to do this, it couldn't be a side project, because we'd seen that all of our side projects had just stayed side projects, because, actually launching a product takes a massive amount of energy and money and creativity and effort. And actually, if we were always going to have it as a side thing, the clients will always take priority. That the client was paying you $50,000 or $100,000 for a project, then they're screaming, you're going to drop everything and kind of sort it. So we made this decision, and Mark and Luke, my 2 co-founders, went off to start the company full time, and I was kind of working on it part time. And I said, like, I'll deal with everything else. So I basically sold the agency and what's the word for it? Extracted ourselves from our other commitments to the various. So I was doing a day a week for an edtech company, because we'd sold one of our apps to an edtech company. I was doing a day a week on this JV we were doing. I was running the agency, and I was trying to sell it without the founders. That was hard. And also trying to do some stuff on ScreenCloud. So it was really tricky. And then there was a moment where there was no going back. It's like, oh. Meanwhile, ScreenCloud was, growing like most SaaS companies do in the early days. I think after about 4 months, it was doing, say, like $4,000 in revenue per month. And I was like, oh my God, we're getting rid of this thing that pays for our mortgages and, puts food on the table, and putting it all in this other thing that currently is only delivering $4,000 a month. And we had staff and everything. So yeah, it was a pretty scary time, but I'm so glad we did it. It was the best thing we did.
So how did you grow that? I mean, what kind of like marketing or things did you guys do to grow the SaaS? Because I mean, we have a tech audience. I imagine some people listening have their own SaaS, whether it be in the startup phase or beyond. But so what did you guys do for, marketing wise, for example, or growth wise, just in general, to get it from 4,000 to, where it's at now?
Yeah. So I guess the 2 things we did, one was kind of accident and one was deliberate. So the deliberate thing is that we invested in content right from the very, very start. So we were bootstrapping the business to start with, but then we raised some venture money. But what we did was made sure that we were working with someone that we knew pretty well, who had worked with us before in our agency, to write content for us. And we just said, right, just put out a load of content. We were asking us to do 4 bits of content a week. So in 2 days. So she was just like a machine. And we weren't really writing about digital signage, because we realized that a lot of the people who were buying digital signage or buying ScreenCloud hadn't had it before, I probably should have mentioned this, is the reason we built this in the first place, is because we wanted to show some stats on our wall in the studio. And we said, oh, let's go. And the only way we could see that we could do it was to go with one of these expensive hardware manufacturers. There didn't seem to be a software option, or at least not a software option where you didn't have to buy, invest in their kind of proprietary sort of hardware, either screens or the box that sat behind the screen. So Luke, our CTO, sort of hacked it and realized it was a little bit more complicated than he thought. So that's where we thought it was a product. So we really were just saying, look, let's not write about digital signage, because people aren't really thinking about it in those terms. They're thinking things like, I can stream things at home using my Chromecast. So why can't I show my tweets on a screen in the office using a Chromecast? So we would just do loads of really long tail content, like how to show Twitter using an Amazon Fire TV stick, or how to show Twitter on your screen, that kind of thing. How to connect to your Google Slides using a Fire.
That's really smart, because you're going to gobble up all that long tail keyword traffic, even though each one isn't maybe a ton of traffic in itself. You add it all up together, and it becomes good traffic. That's pretty cool. Well, how does this actually work? I mean, for example, like to wrap my head around it, I sign up online, right? How do I add devices? Like, how do I get it from the point where I paid your company, I put my credit card in, and now how do I even do that? Do I have to download software to my smart TV? Is there like a browser code? Like, how does it get implemented on devices?
Yeah, exactly that. So you get your Fire TV stick, let's say, for example, you plug it into the back, you go to the App Store on Amazon.
Is it just Fire TV, or is there like other, like Roku or Chromecast also?
Yeah, Chromecast. Yeah, we've got loads of Intel devices as well. So they each have their own kind of different ways of getting the app onto there. But let's say the Fire TV stick, you go onto the App Store, and this is another way we got found, because none of the other sort of incumbents were doing this. They were all doing this proprietary. So you bought the box, the software was already loaded on it. So if you went into Amazon Fire TV App Store and typed in digital signage, there was hardly anyone on there. So we were being found by, that was that was the accidental way in which we grew. But yeah, you go on there, you download the app, ScreenCloud, download it to your TV stick, and then it comes up with the pairing code, which you will get from. So when you add a screen on ScreenCloud, in the CMS, you press add screen and it will come up with a pairing code. You just type that pairing code, and then that screen is then paired with that particular license on ScreenCloud, and then that's it. And then you basically just start adding content. You can add apps. You can add you can change the fonts. You can change the color palette so it looks on brand. You can upload your own content. It's the whole thing was designed because we're a software, a UX web design agency, app development. We were coming at it completely from a software and UX perspective. As I said, like at the time, I mean, lots of people have come in and done a similar thing now, but at the time, the incumbents were really selling the hardware, and software was a bit of an afterthought. So software was ugly, didn't work, wasn't very user intuitive. So we just came in and just approached it from a completely different perspective. And we just found we were pushing on an open door. And I think we did some research about 2 years in. So we're 5 years old now. And I think 70% of our customers at that time had never had any digital signage before. So we were really opening up a new market, which was, when we were going for funding in the early days, it was a real challenge because they were saying, what's the size of the software market for digital signage? And you look at any of the Gartner or McKinsey reports, and it wasn't that big, but it was because they were looking at the old world and how the old world might move. But actually now we've made it's a lot more accessible. Anyone can do it. It's $20 per screen for a device. And it's kind of
that's what I was going to ask. Like, what kind of price point is this? What's the barrier to entry financially? You're saying is it $20 a month for every screen that you add to it, basically?
Yeah. That's the basic now. So one of the things that we realized, 2 or so years in, is that this was really an SMB product, and we were getting a lot of interest from enterprise, but then we were getting objections because we didn't have SSO, or we didn't have SOC 2, we didn't have other kind of security features around kind of showing stuff that sat behind logins and all that kind of stuff. So we rebuilt the product. This is another thing that everyone said we were crazy to do, but we rebuilt the product. And so we've now got different tiers. So if you need all of those kind of bells and whistles, the entry point is $20 per screen per month, but it does get more expensive if you want some of the other kind of enterprise features.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're enterprise and you have that kind of needs, I mean, you expect to pay more, but that's a pretty great price point, honestly, because that also means there's no minimum, right? Like if I wanted to go on there and just put in one screen, I can just do one screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, see, that's fantastic. Especially, well, here's what I like about your software, especially with COVID right now, and then everyone going remote. I see this having a bigger need right now because you can have a situation where you'd have people, for example, you could even say, hey, if a person's working remote, say, okay, well, on your TV, I'm gonna, for employees or staff possibly, even for remote workers behind a computer, you could say, well, we're gonna put the software on your TV so that you can see these things while you're working because we need you to see these live updates. I could see that being a thing, right? I think it's a really interesting concept and just software you have here because, you're looking at it from, the people bought it right now and you were saying like, these manufacturing places or things like that, and that's all great. But I also see a potential here for people who are just work from home because the remote, maybe sales figures. You could have a whole remote sales team, for example, working from their computers. And if you put this on their screens, they could see where the sales numbers are or what, territories or just live updates that you want them to have during their workday, right? And then at the end of the day, they just turn it off. They turn the channel, right? Simple enough, So I could see that being integrated as well, like and experimentally. And I think that's just such a cool concept, which actually brings me to my next question, which is, where do you see the future of this going? The title of the podcast is The Future of BizTech. So, where do you see this going in 5 years, for example, like with how things are changing? What if you had to guess, where is it going?
So I think there's two things. I think you're actually spot on because the future of work is going to be more, a mixture of remote and going into the office. And we've started working with this thing we're calling it embeddable channels or virtual screens, but it's effectively a version of ScreenCloud that you can look at on a browser. But it's slightly different the way it's sort of laid out. But you can either look at it on a browser or you could embed it into your intranet or something like that. But the other thing that we're doing is we're kind of thinking of it like Netflix for work. So going back to this idea of you go onto, let's say in the morning, you're working from home and you can do catch up like you would with Netflix. So you might just go into the ScreenCloud app and the normal screen is like a passive experience. Someone schedules it or it's scheduled and it changes and you don't really have any, you don't interact with it. You just kind of go, oh yeah, that's cool. Where it was with this, it's much more of a kind of, right, I'm going to look in here, I'm going to look in the marketing channel, let's say. So you've got different channels. And I'm going to go, yeah, click. That's interesting. I'm going to watch that. There's a little video they've done about a particular campaign. Brilliant. Okay, there's a message from the CEO. I'm going to look at that. And I've only got 5 more minutes, so I'm just going to quickly look at the sales numbers, and then I'm going to go off and do my first meeting. So I think there'll probably an element like that. So we really see digital signage, as I said, moving from this kind of idea of digital posters to something that becomes much more rules-based, and that could be written rules that someone creates, or it could be learnt rules through AI. So it's kind of like, how do you, if you think about at the moment in the workplace, we're surrounded by loads of messaging. We're all using Slack or Teams. We're doing Zoom videos, Loom videos. It's just constant. So how do you make sense of that? How do you surface that content? And I think that could be done either by someone writing rules. So they say, well, look, these kinds of information we think is really important. We're going to show that. But it could also be some AI stuff. So let's say, for example, you were saying about sales figures. You've got a dashboard that's showing what happens if the system kind of is working out what is normal and what isn't normal. So it's kind of looking at your dashboard. And again, bearing in mind that people, the screen's there, it's not in front of you. It's kind of something that's kind of there. What if it sort of notices something that's out of the ordinary? So it goes, normally you have churn of 1% a month or something. It's jumped up to 10% this month. The system should be able to sort of work out that this looks really, really unusual and surface that content, perhaps more than some of the other content.
You're going to have an AI aspect to this in the you're looking at a smart system that can actually not just serve the content you want, but serve content that should be seen based on that learning, machine learning of it.
Yeah, I think that's
That's really
absolutely where
cool.
it's going. Yeah,
And I
because
like the browser idea because that's also really cool because people have usually multiple screens anyway, especially working remote. And if you had a tab open, for example, that's just your company tab browser, like in just Google Chrome, because you could have a plugin. Obviously, right? You
yeah,
just create a plugin on there, and all of a sudden it's like if I want to serve this screen to all my staff, if they click on that tab, they can see what everyone needs to see at that moment. Like
yeah,
as a CEO who has remote workers, a lot of my people are here in Denver because, we had an office, right? But then with COVID, well, we don't have an office anymore. So now we're starting to hire people around the nation just because, it's a bigger talent pool. We can get the best of the best when you can, work outside of your location. And so, this software really interests me from that point of view, especially if you come out with that kind of browser version, because I'm like, yeah, there's some things that I want everyone to be able to see pretty much ongoing or reference. And if I could create that, if you had a plugin where I could log into that and I could just serve it to all their screens, I mean, that's super cool and very huge when it comes to a communication, even a
yeah.
training point as well.
Yeah. So I think as well, so people are cool. Like we've got some of our customers who created their own kind of company TV, which is exactly that. And the nice thing as well is that you can have content scheduled and you can some of it can be dynamic. It can be pulling through social media stuff, or it can be pulling through data. But then if you want to, you can take it over and you can do a live broadcast. So you can cast directly. You literally just go, hey, everyone, like press a button. And then suddenly, you're there and you're kind of saying, and then when you stop, it goes back. So no, you don't have to reset it or anything. But so we did our first all hands the other day using this kind of new technology. It's using some of the technology from Twitch actually. And it's, just allows you. So instead of when you do a Zoom cast to all of your company, it's 5, there's a few of you, but we're nearly 100 people now. So it's quite cumbersome, but and if you're 1,000 or 10,000 people, it just becomes really difficult. So with this, you basically, you just live cast, and whoever's got who's got the mic at the time speaks to the whole company, and then you just stop when at the end and it goes back.
You know what this could be cool for? Something that just came to mind, and you probably already thought about this, but something that I just wanted to talk about. So before COVID, we were registered for multiple conferences. And, obviously conferences kind of got shut down and went away. They're rescheduling for, 2021. But what I'm starting to see is this uptick in kind of these smaller virtual conference style settings. But there's a limitation to that when it's based on attendance in that kind of Zoom meeting style. Like, there's only so many people we could put on this before it became too distracting. But what I think is interesting about your technology is I envision this situation where you could have a virtual conference, but because everything was streaming onto people's screens, you really can now watch this person give their speech, in that more live interactive way, where sometimes these video conferences fall short, and I think that's interesting, especially, because, there's certain things you're not going to ever be able to replace a conference with, right? The whole point of conferences was that in-person interaction. But that being said, when you're forced to adapt and overcome, it seems like your software could take a big role in conference companies to try to figure out a way to use that and get it onto people's screens in their homes. Watching it on your TV is different than watching it on your screen at your computer, right? Because a lot of people have maybe 13 or 15-inch laptop screens, whereas the TVs are, 45 to 60, 70 inches big, right? And so having that kind of more interaction in that sense and watching a keynote speaker from your TV versus your smaller laptop, that really changes the experience. And I feel like something like what you're doing could help with that too.
That'd be quite nice. Yeah. Cause you could have your kind of you could have your Slido or whatever on your laptop, but you've got the main stage is your main TV. Yeah.
Yeah. See, look at that. I'm giving you ideas. See,
yeah,
now you got a new industry to go after now. We'll talk about it later. All right. A couple personal questions for you. And I ask this for about every guest. When you were a kid, what did you want to do when you grew up? And then how did it transition to what you're doing now?
Okay. So I wanted to be either an artist or a rock and roll star, I think. When I was
kind of the same.
Yeah, I kind of just thought, you know what, I'm going to be doing something creative. It'll be fine. I don't have to worry about anything else. So I don't know, how did it really transition? I almost went to college to do art, and then I had a kind of change of heart and went and did economics and politics and philosophy, and started working in publishing, worked for The Economist magazine, and then kind of got into sort of digital, and then got into an agency. And then, so I think though, the one thing that's probably been constant is I always imagined that I would have my own business. And I'm not sure whether, I think that's partly because I've never been very good at being told what to do. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that might be, I think a lot of people who run their own business kind of go, oh, no one would employ me.
I was like, oh yeah, speaking to the choir, right? Like,
yeah. So that's probably the only thing that kind of, I guess, links back, is that kind of definitely a desire to do things my own way, and not because I wanted to rule the world or earn lots of money or anything. I think it's just, just follow my own
that freedom to express, right?
And just if you think, and what I love as well is if things go well, you benefit. If things go badly, then well, you don't. But like, if you work for a company, if things go well, you still get paid, whether it goes well or bad. You might get a commission or whatever. But I love that kind of, the fact that if you do a really, really good job and you work really hard and you try your best, in theory, you get some kind of reward.
You can control your own destiny in a way, right? You're either your best friend or your own worst enemy, but it's all on you at least. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and I love the thing as well is you're constantly learning. I mean, we've got brilliant investors, and we've learned so much from them. Even having, as I said, I started my first business in 2004. You'd think I've seen everything, but there's so much more that we have to learn about. And just hired a new VP of sales in LA, and a VP of marketing, and again, there's so much stuff that they know that I don't know, and I just love that. I love that constantly learning more about things to do with the businesses. I think
that's awesome. Okay, so last personal question. Who was one of your mentors business-wise, or even maybe just personal growing up? And then what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given business-wise?
Oh man,
See, people know that I just spring this on you because it's not an easy question.
I'd say at the moment, I don't know. At the moment, we're thinking about a new category, because I've been talking about digital signage, and we're realizing that we're going to move into a new category. So there's a really good book, and hang on, I'm just going to grab it. This book, Play Bigger, and it's written by 4 different people.
Sorry, right. What was it called again?
Play Bigger.
Okay, Play Bigger. Got it.
And it's all about creating a new category, and the reason for doing that, and why it's such a good thing to do. And it's so relevant for where we are right now, because I think ever since we started, we've always felt like a bit of an outsider in the digital signage industry. We used to go to conferences, and it would just be full of like men in grey suits selling screens and pixels and bevel edges and cabling. And they were like, what are you guys with your little software thing over there? So we've always felt like the outsider. But I think, creating all the things I was saying about how we think digital signage is going to go in the future, I think we want to create some kind of, define it and own some kind of category. So that's whether that's my influence at the moment, but that's who's, I'm thinking a lot about this and these guys and what they've done, and people like the Drift characters. They created that category, conversational marketing, which they could have just sort of written a book about bots, chat bots.
Yeah.
Hey, but instead, no, they talked about conversational marketing. They created a category, and I think that's really amazing. Oh man, best piece of advice. I know I've got some, but I can't.
I mean, listen, the book itself, like even just recommending the book, that's good advice. Right? I wrote down, like I was over here like writing down like the title of the book here too, because like I want to read it now.
Mm.
So that's, if there's like that one liner you can think of, then that's awesome. If not, even just the audience knowing about that book, seems pretty inspirational to you.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, the other sort of, I suppose it's not a specific piece of advice, but the whole thing around SaaS is is that there is a playbook. So, quite often we're in businesses, we're constantly trying to kind of reinvent things. And, but one of the things that I realized, and again, this is what our investor said to us, is like, okay, SaaS is quite a relatively new industry in the grand scheme of things compared to mechanical engine, motor cars or something like that. SaaS is quite, a recent thing, but there's a lot that's been written about it, and there's a lot of data and stuff that you can follow, and people behave in a kind of largely predictable way. So I think sort of understanding that and taking confidence from that when things first start with SaaS, I was saying earlier, we were going sort of 4 or 5 months and we were still only doing $4,000 in revenue, which when we started our agency, we were doing $40,000 within 2 or 3 months. But what we found, and it took us 22 months to get to our first $1 million in revenue, and then another 6 months to double that. And that was the thing, is like that, if you look at the playbook, if you understand what you're doing and understand all the metrics, you realize that you just got to put faith in it. You go, okay, well, I can see that this stuff takes a long time to build, but then it starts to really roller coaster, and that gets super exciting. So I guess my one piece of advice that was useful from certainly from our investors is, don't forget that there are lots of people who've done this before, who've done it really, really well, and you don't have to reinvent it each time. You obviously do your own spin on it, but seek out that wisdom and use it to your advantage.
That's great advice. Listen, I have the last thing here is, how can people reach you, or, the website? I mean, if there's anyone who's listening who wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for them to do that? And then also, remind people about your web address and how, if they're interested in your product, what they should do as well.
Yeah. So the web, actually we bought the .com. So you can do screencloud.com or screencloud.io or screen.cloud. We've got all of those. But yeah, anything ScreenCloud, you'll find us. And then if you want to talk to me, probably the best thing is to connect with me through Twitter, because it's easy to remember. And if you just message me there, it's at David Hart, Hart, or look me up on LinkedIn, that kind of thing. But yeah, I love talking about all of this kind of stuff around, especially the transition from agency to product company, because I've done a few talks on it, and people come up to me afterwards and go, "Oh my God, I'm exactly at the point where you were before you made a decision, and we're just wrestling with this ourselves." So yeah, I know that it's kind of a rich vein that people are kind of potentially interested in.
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on the show. You've given the audience a ton to think about, and I hope people go to ScreenCloud.io or ScreenCloud.com. Check it out. I was on there earlier, watched the video. It looks amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing those new things you were talking about, like the browser version. That would be really huge. So I wish you well and all that, and thanks again for being on the show.
No, thank you.